Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello, Tom. Welcome to my podcast. I'm very excited to have you here. And as you know, you're my first guest, so it's a new thing and it's very nice to share it with you. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, very good. Back home in Barcelona. Happy to be back. And it's something that is probably rare to say in nowadays. Happy to be back home.
Nice. Before we start, I just want to make a short introduction for those who might don't know you. Maybe you can add or correct me if you think that the way I describe you is not accurate, but Tom is a movement artist, he's a choreographer, he's a martial artist, an acrobat, and generally I would describe him a freak of nature. Tom has been doing many things around the field of movement and contemporary dance, and he has been founding the contemporary dance company Wonderground together with his partner, Rosel Tutuzaus. And he's also the founder of the Movement Archery, which is a body of work for pedagogy and movement education. And he's been teaching his workshops and seminar. How many years already? Around 7, 10 years? How many years have you been traveling?
Yeah. Movement Archery, 7 years.
7 years, already. Yeah. Cool. Maybe we can start just by telling, if you can share a little bit, what have you been doing? I know we've met quite recently, and I know that now you've been in Poland. No, what have you been doing there?
Yeah, basically we traveled together. Me and Rosé, we went to just give a 3 days workshop there, which was very nice. Also, first time in Poland, and I have Polish roots. So it was also quite a fascinating trip for me to go there for the first time.
You don't speak Polish.
Like so. We also. I don't speak Polish. I know very little words. They tried to teach me a few things, but it didn't go so well. But it was this trip. It was after we met you, and it concluded a working tour, which we're very happy to have. Which included a creation of a performance in SID, and then before another workshop, which was a collaboration with a martial artist by the name of Karsten Stausberg in Cologne, Germany. So cool. We were about a month and a half, 2 months away.
On the road. And how did it feel to travel and teach in this pandemic? Did you feel a significant difference in this tour in comparison to how life was before the corona crisis?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everything becomes much more, I think, special, everything movement related nowadays, because I think that, it's kind of like you take away the possibility of doing something, and then when it happens, people maybe take it less for granted. So people who show up to the events and the dancers that we're working with in our creative process, they were much more, I would say, like sensitive or vivid with all the propositions that we gave. And then on the other hand, you all the time have this threat in the background of like regulations will change, we will have to stop in the middle, somebody will test positive, and the whole thing needs to go down. So it gives a certain tension that is, it has something exciting about it, actually. I mean, it's, of course, nobody wants things to get canceled, but you feel you're doing something that, again, it's not for granted. And this is quite an interesting feeling.
Yeah, it's kind of a good reminder to what is always there, but so hidden, so we don't notice it. But how did you feel about, I'm in my base in Vienna before the pandemic. I used to teach a lot of regular classes, and then many things changed. And one of the things that I've noticed with my students is just how this Corona crisis affects the way people treat their own bodies. And yeah, did you sense something different in people's approach to touch, to being in a room and moving with other people, or you really felt like, business as usual, people forgot about it and just dive into your material, or you had to kind of negotiate this whole new situation in your teaching experiences?
It's a very good question. I think that it's a little bit, there's the other side of this new sensitivity. So on one hand, I feel that this sensitivity that people have now is a sensitivity that is like make them appreciate more. But then on the other hand, it's almost like something about bodies and the ability to communicate is a little bit less resilient now, which is totally logical. People have been sitting at home and not interacting so intensely and so regularly. And then it's almost like I feel that the communication is like too easily making too much of a big waves in the room. Like, if there's kind of a little bit of a hesitation from communicating too directly from the people. It's like everybody wants to be on their own, because this is what they've been doing for a couple of months. And then also on the physical level, that I would say that naturally people would be more coming to engage with us and to learn from us. They would come more kind of proactively wanting to be pushed and challenged. And now there's less of this. It's almost like people want to take it easy and want to take it slowly, and almost like finish a whole event without never going outside of their comfort zone. Now, of course, we try our best to not see it as something that like to adapt and accommodate the way people come. But I would definitely feel that a longer time of not communicating physically for people can be something that has serious consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely resonate with what you meant about the comfort zone and like our roles as teacher. I remember that when the pandemic started and the first lockdown happened, I was quite quick to react with the whole online teaching because I have this kind of tech nerd aspect of me, and I set it up the whole platform to teach online very quickly. And I remember that in the first few classes, I just felt, okay, yeah, I'm just keeping like what we did in the studio now on my living room. And very quickly I realized that that nobody is interested in pushing their bodies. Nobody, like people are not, like the whole notion of meeting to practice got a completely different focus. And yeah, and of course, like that, like we've already, 7 months after the first lockdown and many things change, but nevertheless, it's something that I feel that became more present in my classes and what I notice about people's like interest. Why do they come to learn and why do they come to the studio? And then this notion of getting something else beyond this kind of linear drive to get better about something is something that clearly I see it as a positive thing, like not saying that improvement and goal chasing doesn't have room place in the studio, but to a certain degree I feel like that it's a good thing that is happening. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Again, I feel that in general, this is why I say, like, if I can connect all of the changes, is people became more sensitive, which I agree that totally. That like generally it brings a lot of good things with it. I think also that another thing that connects to the sensitivity is that people become more sensitive to the reason of the content. And this goes back to why things are not for granted. It's almost like there is more effort to come and engage in something physically, more effort to communicate. So people are more focused on like, okay, why do I even do this? And I think that this is great. I think if people would spend more time in the existential realm, all the activities that they do will be more coherent with themselves. I would say, and probably we'll get back to it also later, I suppose. But I would say that what I see as far as the lack of willingness to physically go outside of the comfort zone, I agree that it can be something that usually is connected to goal chasing. But like, for example, in our case, and in my personal case, for me, the going outside of the comfort zone is something that I do, for my well-being, not in order to get something. And for example, I know that it's very difficult to give a safe space for somebody to go outside of their physical comfort zone through this medium of a screen. If I'm with a person in this space, it's easier for me to tell you can go further, and I will look, I will support you if needed. I will give you the right tips for these things not becoming hurtful for yourself. But through the screen, I would never do it, because I don't feel the person. And then I think that in that sense, losing this ability, this is, I think it can be a little bit risky. Again, whatever, like nothing is in that sense is good or bad. But I would say that totally the existential thing that comes now with the practice is something that I think is very good for the work that we do. It's very supportive. But then again, the sensitivity can also go very quickly into, I'd say, certain fragility. And then some of the tools that we practice might become too difficult.
Yeah, I guess there is a certain tension, because when you're choosing to engage in studying your body, and especially, something we both share is this kind of interest. Think about volumes of kinetic energy, and looking at movement as something that can really moves you, and not that you're always the one in control, let's say like this. And so there's a certain tension, I guess, between you enter the studio because you want to touch certain existential threat, let's say like this. You want to push your body to a place where you feel like, wow, I'm alive because I'm alive because I'm risking my life. And of course, to the degree that we do it in the studio, we are not, it's still a very safe space. And I guess that at least that's something that I really feel like maybe relates a little bit to both our cultural background, and I live in Vienna and you live in Barcelona, but we both grew up in Israel, which is a place that let's say in its essence, there is a mentality of a war zone, and the safety is never for granted there. And I guess that this is something that I felt that changed really radically where I live now, that people didn't confront with catastrophes on that scale for so many years that it really affected the sense of safety, and yeah, now people are getting used to it, and there's different people approach the whole crisis differently, but yeah, I think that's maybe something that is quite hard to negotiate nevertheless. How do you enable people to feel safe when they are already feeling unsafe regardless of the situation? And maybe that's something that is especially hard to communicate through online teaching and this kind of platform. But even in the studio, I find it not so easy. People do bring those tensions, and it's very hard to filter what is going on in your life. And when you enter a studio, even if you act professionally, let's say, no?
Yeah, totally. And I think that this adjustment, that, for example, this adjustment of moving into a different culture, and I would say that in that sense, a culture is always a generalization. But as a generalization, of course, that I totally agree with you that the difference between most of Europe and, for example, particularly Austria and Spain is a little bit different, but still, and Israel is, for example, is a cultural difference that needs a lot of negotiation. And I think this negotiation makes life interesting. It pushes you and pulls you in ways that make you, I believe, grow eventually. And what I feel is happening a little bit now, and I don't think that is necessarily because of the pandemic. The pandemic just like gave us it's like extracted it. It's like made it more extreme. And maybe this is something you can tell me if you resonate or not, but that it's almost like our modern culture, not our specific culture, is like trying to take away this necessity of negotiation. So it's almost like if I come to work or to teach or to learn or to dance in a place like Vienna, or in a place like Israel, or in a place like Brazil, in a place like United States, when a couple of years back, I remember that it was really kind of an effort for me to think, how should I bring myself into this context? What do I need to change about the way I hold my body, the volume of my voice, the words that I use? And it's almost now we start to receive so many rules that these rules kind of, they minimize the necessity for adaptation. And for example, in the pandemic, it's very clear that it's like we chose that if we hold a workshop in a certain physical space, we basically take the risk, you know. But then outside, all what you get is instructions of physical distance, type of activity, what to eat, what not to eat, what touch, what not to touch. You know, and if you add it to hold the context of our modern society, it's becoming more and more kind of like, okay, you know, we have one set of instructions, and this set of instructions is supposed to accommodate all types of different cultures and behaviors and tensions. And basically, like, you know, all of you fit in and then don't adapt to each other. Like, you know, so it's like, of course, no mistakes. Nobody supposedly gets hurt, but all of us, like, you know, kind of try to fit into kind of a very specific formula. And this is something that I don't know, I'm just reflecting on it. And again, maybe you can also share from your experience, but it's almost like I miss 7 years ago when I was so frustrated with adapting myself to different cultures. And today I feel that, like, you know, little by little, the adaptation is it's one big shop. It's one big,
you know, like shopping malls. It's like, you know, it's these spaces that you feel always the same. And yeah, it's definitely, there is definitely something that I felt it like we took a little trip to Italy in the summer, and generally I would say that Austrian and Italian are not that similar, no? In many things, especially like physical expression. But you know, definitely yeah, and you know, that's the interesting thing, because I think it brings it back to the body, and this is something that maybe is not that addressed on the public sphere, because I think that again, we are, generally speaking, we are living in a disembodied societies. So of course, when the corona crisis comes, and we are all worried on preserving life, but we don't look at the body as the mean to address the problems. And yeah, and then, you know, like, we restrict bodily behavior, but we don't look at it as something that has consequences. So it's like, you just say a rule like, okay, you need to be 1 meter from people. You know, like, I mean, this, in a mind of a dancer, this is a very interesting score, because I have to always keep a certain distance from people. You know, it's like, this can occupy you for a lifetime, no? Like, just engaging with this kind of task, and it demands a lot of like physical skills, you know, but I think that the way it is being communicated or maybe received is again, it's a fear triggering, and it doesn't, and yeah, and then you take a culture like Austria and Italy, which are very different when it comes to physical expression, and you put them into those systems of regulation, and then yeah, things become more the same than different, and that's in a way sad, yeah, because.
And I would like also to what you said now, a point that I can resonate a lot with, that this is the idea that, like, you know, the thinking of a singular consequence, you know, okay, we limit the distance, we limit the interaction, So we are taking care of something that is very important. You know, it's very necessary now when there is a pandemic outraging, which means we're taking care of mortality. We minimize the number of deaths. But there's more consequences. And it's important that at least they are being expressed. You know, people don't interact, they lose this capacity to interact. It's not like, you know, the capacity to interact is being reserved because there's a pandemic. And it's not that like the capacity to physically interact can be reserved through Zoom classes and through Netflix. This capacity will be lost. Of course, you know, it can be regained, but like it's important to say it. You know, we are paying a price that is not only economical.
And actually, I heard from one of my students in Vienna, who is a teacher, I think primary school. I don't really remember. And it made me think, like, you know, because I also have kids, but they're in an age where they didn't really, the pandemic didn't affect them to a level that is really substantial. But my student, she shared with me that one time in the school, like you know, the kids had time where they can interact, when they can play outside. And then one kid accidentally touched another kid, and his reaction was like, like he was so afraid of it. And you know, and I think, like, yes, adult, we can go through this, we can contextualize it more wide, so we can understand, okay, we are losing some capacity, but there's a certain context. But I think that the generation that will really get, you know, that we will somehow have to confront with the actual implication of the pandemic is those kids who are really, it really changes the way they understand bodily interaction in a very substantial way. Yeah, and I really wonder what will be the effect, because it's such an unaddressed issue in general. No, it's like, I mean, it really connects in a way to the reason why I wanted to initiate this podcast. You know, I've been busy in the last decade with the question of what does it mean to live meaningfully in relationship with your body, and I feel that it's such an unaddressed question. Like, many people are addressed with how to train good, or like, you know, like if you're working through a certain disciplinary lens, so you want to improve in your own discipline, or you want to discover new things within your own discipline. But really to question, like, what does it do to your life and to how you are and what kind of thoughts you have and how do you interact with others? That's something that I feel that is always in the shadow. We are aware of it, and there's a lot of cliches around, you know, like in each discipline has its own cliches of how it's quickly transforming your life. But I think this is, for me, the core question, you know, like, and yeah, I don't want to get stuck just on the pandemic, because it's just one thing that I wanted to kind of ask you, but maybe I can open another topic which is somehow related but moving away. Like, so because before the pandemic you've been traveling a lot, and I know that, like, being on the road was something that was very present in your life, and I just wanted if you could share a little bit, like, your thoughts about how did this particular lifestyle affected your relationship with the body. And the reason I'm interested in this question is because I think that relating to the body demands, on one hand, certain amount of novelty and inspiration, you know, new things that happen that you can kind of keep yourself motivated. But on the other hand, there is a certain necessity for routine and predictability, you know, like, and yeah, I'm interested in how did your lifestyle affect your relationship with your body?
It's an interesting question. I think that first of all, like, as a disclaimer before I answer, probably the you know, I believe that, like, the relationship with my body is including many relationships with myself, you know, at the same time. So for example, I would say that, like, on a very simple level, I think that traveling demands a lot if you want to sustain a regular practice routine, you know. So a lot of flights, which means, like, you're out of the air, sleeping is not regular, all the time changing spaces, all the time changing types of foods. which I know that also as a professional, to sustain a certain kind of consistent practice routine, it's all the things that you don't want to do. You know, like my practice routine always benefits from having regular sleep and a diet that accommodates it, and spaces that like, you know, that I return to and practice there. And then that this kind of consistency in spaces is almost like a reference to the things that change, and so on and so on. But I think that also what I spoke about before, this adaptation is bringing into the relationship with the body something very interesting that is kind of like, I would say, it's almost like nomadism or dynamicism. You know, it's like that nothing can be, first of all, taken for granted. Second of all, become a fixed object, which I think is a wonderful thing, because, you know, it's taught me to acknowledge that all of a sudden I land in a different space, and I'm things that I would like normally, which again normally also change a lot when you travel a lot, like certain moves, certain qualities of movement, and certain skills, all of a sudden they're not there, or they're not there the way I thought they would be. You know? And then I need to work with it regardless, because also this traveling was never kind of was never purely backpacking. I was always working, either performing, creating, or teaching. So I need to come, not exactly know what I have to give to the context that I come, not exactly know what I can teach, what I can perform, or what I can create, and still work with it. And this, I felt that it was something actually very empowering, because it's almost like I got used to the idea that I always miss something, and this is also a strength, you know. It's like I have all the time this kind of like something is not there the way it used to be. What can I do with it? You know, what can I become now? And I think that I know a lot of the what you say, a lot of the kind of the dogmas or the cliches of disciplines is sometimes to get stuck on, for example, I'm working on something for many years, and then it's almost like I'm getting used to the narrative that I am Tom in judo that has a weak sayonage, and like, you know, and it becomes kind of an identity, these things that I'm working on and these things that I'm working towards, you know. And then like, and I get pride and happiness and certain, it's like almost like I really treat it as my persona. I'm Tom that works on sayonage, and then maybe I improve my sayonage. The teacher says I managed to pull it in a randori. Then I am Tom that managed to do the sayonage despite working on the sayonage for years, you know. And all of this is identities that in reality, in a, you know, in kind of being in the present moment with the body, has nothing to do with, for example, in a judo context, my ability to do judo in a specific moment. You know, like this whole sayonage thing is like a story, is a total narrative. And traveling basically taught me not to identify with these stories. And then, you know, so this kind of, I would say like it's almost like I'm getting used to a nomadic body rather than like, you know, a fixed body. So yeah, I think this is kind of gives the both sides of the traveling lifestyle.
Okay, and just to continue it, because, you know, I've been living this lifestyle much shorter than you, because it took a big toll on my life, and I stopped traveling kind of 2 years ago. But I think that, you know, like something that is interesting to ask in this question, and I wonder how do you deal with it, because something that definitely happens is that there is a new identity that is being emergent. No, it's like I'm the traveling artist, I'm the guest, I'm the new exciting dish in the table when you travel, and yeah, and one thing that, you know, it relates to another point that I want to talk to you about, you know, being a student, but we will develop it later. But how did you negotiate, or how do you still negotiate the tension that when you're traveling and you're arriving as a guest, there is a certain excitement about it, no? And there's a certain, like, you're being lifted to a certain podium that maybe you don't want to identify, or maybe you do want to identify with. And then it definitely can be the roots for the establishment of another fake identity that maybe is more pleasant to relate or not so pleasant, doesn't matter, but it's still kind of the same. So how do you address this?
Well, I think that the lesson of not identifying with the story goes also to this. Like, even though it might seem at the moment more pleasant to identify with the exciting guest, I also think that it's I mean, I have learned, not that I think, I have learned that it's also an identity that most likely is not relevant to me being present in the same place, and also me doing the work that I was invited to do. So I think that a lot of things that help me with not identifying, for example, with something positive and not becoming a certain kind of spectacular image to myself, which is false, because I'm spectacular at certain things, and other things I'm very not spectacular about. And it also changes in every trip. But it was like to be very pragmatic about it, which again, this is also something that, going back to me being a bit nostalgic about where society is going to, if I'm invited to perform, you know, at the end of the day, I need to make certain movements to the eyes of the audience. If I'm invited to teach, I need to bring content and make sure that this content is being practiced, is being questioned, is being demonstrated by me. If I'm coming to create, I need to make sure that I end up with the performance at the end. This is like, you know, this was and starting from this. And by the way, in the same sense, because traveling for work allowed me also to travel a lot, not for work, in between. And it was okay. And if I go to see, you know, the beautiful nature around the Rio de Janeiro, is me finding the way to place myself in these jungles. So every time that I would get a little bit confused with kind of the image or the symbol, I would go to the only thing that actually is in my momentarily control, which is the pragmatic actions, which stand in the essence of the. Now, of course, like, you know, to do what I was supposed to do, you know, is also something that can change, and also something that, like, you know, sometimes it faces problems or obstacles or challenges. I think that the main kind of confusion with this stuff is that in movement, everything is ephemeral, which means that if I do a movement, it's gone as soon as I do it. You know, I cannot kind of retain it. I cannot capture it. I cannot collect it, which is different. For example, I paint and sculpture as hobbies, and then I have my sculpture standing in the other room, and the paintings in the other room, and I can, even if I stop painting, I can show you the paintings that I used to do. Yeah. You know. But with movement, it doesn't work like this. Nothing I can show you to prove to you that, like, you know, 2 years ago I did this wonderful performance. You were not there, and that's it. It's gone. You know, and this is kind of like, you know, is a kind of an interesting reminder to the importance of the action, and I think also action is a very good alternative to you know, on a personal, like on the self narrative. You know, I feel myself when I act. I feel myself when I move in this context, and I don't feel myself by identifying with, like, you know, the great dancer or the great teacher or the exciting guest. So now, how much this idea can be metaphors for example, even as a guest, like you say, like, you know. To actions of guests, not actions of on stage or in the studio. This is a good question, and this is, you know, I try to find many answers, depends on which trip. But I think in general, this kind of thinking of like, okay, you know, what can I do rather than like, what do I want to say about myself? This is a good strategy or a good technique to not get trapped in the narrative.
Yeah, although I guess, you know, like something that is a little bit inevitable, and this is it is in those situations is, yeah, you're traveling somewhere, and yeah, and people treat you in a certain way according to how you're being presented. Like I remember I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Tal, and we talked about it was in the context of how do we feel ourselves when we are being in a contact festival and we've been invited to teach, and what's the difference if you haven't been invited to teach and you're just there. I mean, you are a teacher nevertheless because you have a teaching practice, but one time, you know, they hang your photo on the wall and it's written your little description of what you're going to teach, and in the other example not. And how does it change the way you behave in a jam space? And I think that, this is something that I think that it's very hard completely to filter out of your system. You can be aware of it, but I think that to come to a level that, you know, like that your behavior is really authentically the same when you walk into the supermarket and nobody knows you, and then when you're entering into a space where people have a lot of expectation from you, you need to be a fucking master to completely filter it out of the way you will, you know, just the way you will, you know, your posture, you know.
I mean, for sure, the photo hanging is awkward. You know, this is just like, you know, when you come to a place and you see your photo in front of yourself, especially if you have a different haircut, you know, and it's like,
if it's awkward, if you feel awkward, it's already, I guess it's a good sign, you know. And if you feel too much pride, then, you know, like maybe it's not.
But by the way, Rosé, for example, my partner, she has a good strategy. She likes to say, like, you know, the teaching ends in the studio, the performing ends on stage, you know, which means that we finish the workshop, I'm stepping out of the studio, I'm not teaching anything anymore. I'm just on. We finish a performance, this doesn't matter which festival, it doesn't matter which theater, we go out, you know, to mingle with the artsy people with the cheap wine. We're normal, like, you know, we're not coming out with the same presence, with the same gaze, you know, that we used on the stage. And I think this is a wonderful practice, you know. I really appreciate
it's a practice. I think it's a practice.
And she's always like, kind of, it's
a
practice.
That's my point. It's a practice.
Totally.
It's not that you can cognitively say the teaching is done and then, you know, you know, especially I feel it especially when I go into institutions, you know, because in institution the hierarchies are so rigid that you know, people immediately project. And I remember the first time I taught in a dance university was maybe 3 months after I graduated from my own dance education. So, and it was more of a chance that I got there than like anything else. And I remember that I came in and I taught what I was teaching, whatever it was, and then the class ended and one student came and you know, and she came to ask me some questions, and I already saw in the eyes that I am representing for her this kind of the successful teacher. And then I told her, listen, I just graduated 3 months ago. Don't expect any wisdom from me. But, you know, like this projection is there, and I feel like that it's a certain interesting thing to look at, because yes, in a way, teaching and being in contact with people and delivering your message or your content, whatever you're delivering, is somehow consciously or unconsciously is also a reflection of who you are as a person. And I think that it's inevitable that it will manifest. I mean, I've seen many people that, you know, that when the class was finished, they kept on teaching in the dinner. And you know, and then it's like, then there is a certain, again,
this can be very, very awkward when this happens also. Like, you know, you sit with people for dinner, it's like, look at your posture, you know. It's like, do you feel your connection with the floor? No, I'm eating the salad, you know, what's now on the floor? Like, you know, leave me alone.
Yeah, but you know, like I get your point of the joke, but just to counter it, I do ask this my students. Okay, what is happening in your shoulder blade when you cut your salad? It is a valid question, you know, because the body in a way is present all the time. But I understand your critique in the sense that, like, yeah, leave me alone. Now I don't want you to establish those hierarchies because we are just eating a dinner and it doesn't have to do anything to the teaching. But the question themselves, I think that they are relevant.
Totally. And despite the joke, I completely understand what you're saying. And just before I answer to it, I just want to bring something warmer to wear. So
Sure,
give
no
me
problem.
1 minute. Okay.
Good.
I am back. Yes, it's
good.
getting it's sunny in Barcelona, but getting a bit cold.
Good. Yeah, I wanted to ask another question that I think that again there is a certain cliche in this question, but before I ask it, maybe I'll tell a little bit of a story of how I met you, and which relate to the question. And I think we met in 2016, kind of 4.5 years ago, something like that. And yeah, we met in an event called the Play Fight Camp, and we were both teaching in this event. And I remember you came a bit late, a few days later. And also I think that something that is quite particular in you, in like, let's say in the contemporary dance scene and like movement scene, is like you have relatively a very strong reach, and people know you. Many people have expectation from you, I think more than the average teacher. And I remember that when you arrived to the camp, I just heard about you, and I knew that you're also from Israel, but we didn't know each other, and I was a bit curious which kind of person there is beyond the images that are the way you present yourself, the way people talk about you, and I was curious. And I remember that we didn't speak a lot, but then you joined my class, and I was teaching a class that had to do a lot about swinging. And then I remember after the class, you came to me and you said like, and you just said something very humble. You said like, "Wow, man, I'm so happy I came to your class. I'm so bad in swinging. I can definitely learn a lot about that. Yeah, it was really great to be here." And for me, it was already kind of indicated a certain nice quality that you bring with you wherever you're traveling and teaching, and it's a certain true humbleness. And I'm saying true humbleness because if I'm being honest, and maybe I'll embarrass you a bit, I think you're one of the most talented movers I met. And like you can hold really like a lot of opposite qualities, and it's really impressive. And also I know like the amount of time you have been dedicating to it, and so and it's really impressive. But it really brings me to the question of like how to maintain the ability to be a student. And it's a big cliche, like, stay a student, but how do you really approach it? Because I find that in your particular case, I really see a genuine ability to be curious, and it was present 4 years ago. It was present 2 weeks ago when you visit me, and we practiced some things together. But I'm really curious to hear like how do you contextualize this question?
Well, first, thanks a lot, both for both about the movement and the humbleness. It's a good question. I mean, I don't exactly know, because again, as I said, like there is a lot of the way that I act. A lot is connected to adaptability, and adaptability is many times very intuitive. I think that, for example, I behave a lot in the dance world, but a lot of what I study was not necessarily a lot of principles, especially about pedagogy and especially about learning, didn't come actually from dance or movement. I was really interested in Zen. I had a few years starting in Israel, then in Japan, and until to this day, that I'm regularly trying to kind of to learn and to engage in ideas from Zen. And then there is a lot of, for example, one of the books that influenced me the most was a book that is called The Beginner's Mind by Shunryo Suzuki, which was a Zen monk that he moved to San Francisco, and he opened a center there. And this Beginner's Mind book is basically a series of very short essays that they could be seen as things you can read before you do shikatanza, before you sit to meditate. But it's also kind of guidance of how to approach learning. which again, in the book, it becomes that how to approach learning can be also how you approach life. That is one long learning process. And then specifically, it goes down to when you come to any learning experience, there's most of the time there is no point in coming very, very full, because you need space. You need place that, it's like, if you don't create space, the new experience, the new content, the new knowledge, again, it can be also very, very specific and practical, the new skills, the new ideas, the new moves, you don't have where to put them, where to place them. And then the whole learning experience is kind of like, is losing its essence, when I came and I met you the first time, I was interested in what you have to say, and then when I listened to what you have to say, I did some kind of process of integration. Okay, where does it meet me? Where do I encounter these things that you have to say? So you were teaching arm swings, and back then I was busy with my torso and my ability to express myself with my torso, and changing levels of using the scapulas and the shoulders when I move from the floor up. And then I saw that you have a lot of ideas about it, ideas that I never thought about. So it's like, okay, let's start a conversation about it. And this conversation needs to start from me listening, because I feel I have something to learn there. Now, I think that if this is being done kind of honestly, in every context, that you come to learn, you start from listening, you see what is being experienced and what is being said, where does it meet you, and then you take it from there. This really helps to stay very, very happy with this thing of being a student all the time.
But how do you negotiate? Tom,
now, I think that,
if I may interfere for a second, because
yes, please.
I get your point, and I think that it's a good base for this question. But how do you negotiate the tension of, you accumulate knowledge and you accumulate skills, and your understanding of the material that you're working with is constantly in a certain spiral of growth, and also you're an opinionated person. You have something to say. You're not just a follower. So you're also acting actively as a teacher. And then how do you filter that? Because that's what I find difficult for myself. You enter a room and then you hear somebody saying, and you have your own references that can already direct you to a certain degree if the information that in front of you is relevant or not. But at the same time, you really need to put this aside in order to really understand what the information, and not just to make your own assumption about the information that is being presented to you. And this is where I feel like the beginner's mind is, but that's not easy thing to do. And that's what I'm trying to open up here.
Yeah, I think that one important tool is also to understand when informations run in parallel and when do they actually spiral into each other, and to understand that this is a process that you can make a decision about. So it might be that if I come to a dance class or a jiu-jitsu class or an acrobatics class, it doesn't necessarily have to spiral with all of my dance, jiu-jitsu, acrobatics knowledge. It can possibly run in parallel at any moment. But if I choose to integrate it, then the negotiation starts. Usually, when you come to a body of knowledge and you choose to integrate it, it happens with much less resistance. But if the integration is something that is kind of habitual, then you always have this tension and you always have these resistances. You know what I'm saying? It's like if I'm coming to a contact class and the first thing that I think about is what I know about the contact, of course, that I will have some tension. But if I come and I say okay, I first of all, I listen and I see what's going on. Then I can finish the class and the whole class, would have nothing to do with what I know about contact. And it's totally fine. And this class was running here and my knowledge runs here. But if something interests me, I'm like, okay, let's spiral them. And this is where the integration happens, but it's kind of it's a tensionless integration. Now, the choice when to integrate, when it's not, this is not an easy thing. But I think that, but regardless if it's easy or not, like, you know, it's something that only each person can do for themselves. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I know. I think the reason I'm interested in that is because, like, personally, I find myself that, you know, like I started making movement and studying body through different things more intensively, let's say, 14 years ago. And still now I feel like I'm in the beginning process of learning how to be a good student. Because like I started from a position that I was not a bad student. I was the most horrible student that one can imagine, like I would come out of a class, I would go out in the middle of the class because I just felt that it's not good. Just like, okay, not interested in that today, going out. And I was really I didn't fit the context culturally, and also I was very arrogant, I would say. But like the strategy that I found for myself is a little bit approaching is my attraction to kind of more multidisciplinary approach to study movement and to study and to understand my body, because this really forces you to be in this situation. It's like, okay, I remember 4 years ago when I started to practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I went to the room. So yes, of course, it's very clear that you don't know anything. Like you cannot fool yourself. But if I go now to a dance class, it's much harder for me to maintain this quality because of the amount of information I have. And I get your idea about this things running in parallel, because I think that maybe there is a certain or maybe I have, and maybe you can identify with it or not, but there is a certain wish to make things connected. Okay, I'm taking this class and I want to get something from it. So it has to come to me. And if I say like, no, this is just a parallel universe that I'm never gonna meet, there is a certain disappointment about it, because okay, then like, I wasted my time, or what have I done here? What did I learn here? So yeah, so so one of my choices of studying many things is especially because it just throws me completely off my comfort zone, and then I really don't have a choice, because I'm very opinionated, and I find it hard to maintain this quality for me.
Totally. I think also to collaborate on this, like, of course, that there is, and this is also something that is a bit is tricky. The hierarchy of famousness is totally useless. Somebody being famous or not famous gives me zero information about the content and the perspective that they have. But there is hierarchy of skills and experience. So for example, if I go for a personal trainer that has been actively training people for 10, 15 years, it doesn't mean that necessarily what they have is more relevant than somebody that started 1 year ago for me, but probably the experience worth something. And it might be that even if I go with somebody that has been a personal trainer for 15 years and their method, their approach doesn't fit me, probably staying in a session, which is a parallel universe, would still benefit me somehow, because this is a large experience that I don't have. 15 years of being a personal trainer, I just don't have it. Same idea again with dance, with fighting, with acrobatics. I've been standing on stages, professional stages, for over 10 years. It might be that you take somebody that just came out of school, and what they have to propose will fit more another person than what I have to propose. But still, they cannot teach about the experience of standing on professional stages for 10 years. And again, you can continue going down, in jiu-jitsu, to do a sayonage, to do a bow and arrow choke. In acrobatics, to do a backflip, to do 200 backflips, to do backflip for 15 years. I'm doing a corkscrew for probably 20 years already. So again, my technical input might not fit everybody, but I do have the experience of 20 years that somebody with technical input that might, be different and fit other people more than mine, don't have this experience. So I think that to remember that even though, with this, I totally agree with you, even though that it's almost like you can always choose to be in a situation and say, okay, this runs in a parallel universe. Therefore, I don't have tension of agreeing or disagreeing. I just engage and I take whatever I want, or I really like it, I integrate. But there's also a certain rational ability to discriminate when is something being based on actual skill and experience and when is something being based on opinion. And
how do you
also doing
approach,
this gives you,
and yeah, and like this is a very interesting point. No, like how do you differentiate opinion to skill and experience? Because even if you have a lot of skill or experience, if you look at, if especially if you're into like looking at the world through this kind of relativity lens, so then you could always solve it and say like, yeah, you have all your experience, but it's still relative to how you understand it, and maybe for me it's not relevant. So then, like, how do you differentiate it? Like, when do you look at it and you say like, yeah, that's something objective, that therefore the opinion matters for me more? Or like, do I get you correct, or do I still miss what you mean?
no, in the bodies of knowledge in the bodies of knowledge of the body, the opinion never matters. Like opinion is opinion. Everybody has their opinions. Opinions are more relevant, in my opinion, on topics that run into the social realm, the political realm, stuff like this. But working with the body is actually, in that sense, it's easy to discriminate. Somebody will teach you about, I created as a choreographer 10, 12 pieces in my life. It's nothing, Therefore, I don't teach choreography. I don't give advices of choreography. If somebody is interested in what I do, this interest can be accommodated. But I'm not talking from a place of experience, because my experience is not, according to my standard, established enough yet. On the other hand, as I said, I do corkscrew for over 20 years, like, with knock on wood, with never getting injured from it, and still being able to apply it on different surfaces in different contexts and different levels of tensions, in martial art context, on stage context, in street context. So like, I have some kind of experience that is valid, and I can show it, I can show it. I can be this experience again and again. I can reproduce, all of these things, they give a certain credibility. Like, as I said, movement is ephemeral. Like, returning to the experience, this is what gives a certain validity. If I talk to somebody that, like, he teaches me about, I don't know, rolling or falling or kicking, and the person cannot roll, cannot fall, cannot kick, then okay, they might have an interesting opinion, but it's an opinion. Now, of course, all of this goes until a certain age, because I also learned with wonderful teachers that have been so old that they cannot do anymore, but they have enough experience of doing and guiding people that this experience becomes even more valid than the ability to reproduce this ephemeral thing. But this is reserved for people who literally cannot do it anymore because of age or an injury. Not, you know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I totally. Of course, I mean, it's very present in. I would say it's much more present in sports than in dance. Dance, I would say, like that. Let's say the dance market and the sport market, because there are a lot of, let's say, old dancers, but when it comes to which people are being invited, there is a certain tendency in the world of dance to take the most fresh and active bodies than the most mature and experienced bodies. But in sports, like, like a lot of legendary coaches, they kept coaching until they got better with time, and they haven't been pushed away for younger coaches. So yeah, I get your point, of course, like that experience matters, and that's maybe something that is kind of unavoidable with the body, you know, like that, like you cannot conceptualize body knowledge. You have to experience it, and this is something that I think that is fundamentally different. Like I read somewhere on your website something in those lines about the difference between, you know, valuing the experience and valuing like what you got from the experience. Or that there is a certain value by itself, by you just being in a certain moment with your body, in regardless to what you actually took from it later, and that just this time that is spent has its own value, even if you cannot, you know, quantize it somewhere later for yourself.
Totally. And, you know, I have two very, when I'm working on my pedagogy, there's two very strong references that I use. One of them is the philosopher by the name of John Dewey. It's an American philosopher from the 30s, that he kind of was the first person with, you know, like education really changed at the beginning of the 1900s. You know, IQ, the idea of IQ was invented, and basically it started to be formed into the form that we have now. But still, John Dewey was actually somebody that like was a little bit contradicting some of the ideas that were developed, and he wrote a book that is called, I think it's called Learning is an Experience, or Education is an Experience. And he basically kind of he emphasized the importance of experiencing content rather than kind of hearing about it, you know, or just seeing it. You know. Now, what does it mean? You know, I would say in our times, I would say embodying content rather than sitting and receiving it passively. You know, one can even say if you even listening is a passive thing or not, but it kind of goes to this idea of which is something that I said before, but it's like kind of like actively moving, you know, or just sensory moving towards the content, or taking it as a theory, taking it as a symbol, taking it as an object. And it's quite complicated, and I think the book is very interesting. But you know, it goes to something very simple also, that like, you know, you cannot learn about nature from books. You know, it doesn't matter how many drawings, it doesn't matter how many maps you will see. You need to go and to take a walk. You know, like a bee in a book is a bunch of informations. A bee that stung you is like, the book cannot tell you what does it feel to the pain, what does it like, you know, how much your skin gonna go up and the red color and all of this. And I think that then when you start to consider knowledge as an experience rather than a set of theories, then a lot of this ability to discriminate what's relevant for you and what's not relevant for you changes. Then the second reference would be this Japanese concept for martial arts that is called shuhari, which is, you know, it's kind of like this this Bruce Lee thing of, Bruce Lee was not Japanese, of course, but he has a famous quote that it goes, when I started the martial arts, a kick was just a kick, a punch was just a punch. Then when I became intermediate, a kick was more than a kick, a punch was more than a punch. When then I mastered the body of knowledge, a kick was again just a kick, a punch again was just a punch. And shuhari is kind of breaking down the learning process into three phases of kind of beginner, intermediate, advanced, breaking out. So it's kind of like you start, you learn, you know, you're just being exposed to language and ideas that are foreign to you, like, you know, and you try to apply them with your body, but then little by little in Japanese, because Japanese being Japanese, probably little by little, we mean 20 years later, you start to reproduce applications according to the language. Then in the last stage, you start to invent applications. And then afterwards, you don't practice, you don't apply anymore. Like you break out, you leave your teacher, and then like the whole body of knowledge has become an organic part of you, and it's evolved through you. You know, so John Dewey and Shuhari is two very good references to, in my opinion, to understand this whole idea of knowledge as experience. I think, though, that it's important to say as a disclaimer that I think that these two ideas are extremely relevant to the body, and I think that they can benefit a lot of people that rely, you know, in our era too much on manuscripts, manuals, internet lectures, and so on. But of course, that if you are a surgeon or an engineer of bridges, you cannot, through experience, build a couple of bridges that will break and people will die, and then you know, and then through this experience learn. Also, as a surgeon, you know, you need to find a way that you are increasing your intellectual capacities of knowing the context before you confront the kind of the real necessity to apply them. Yeah. So it doesn't, I don't think that John Dewey and Shuhari fit all bodies of knowledge, but I think that in our field, and especially as you said, and for sure in dance, they're very much needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, actually, you know, it brings me to another topic that I thought to address with you. Is like, I think, when did you come here to teach in Vienna together with me? I think maybe 2017. I think we shared some workshop, and we had this little bit of discussion about
same year.
Yeah, I think we had a bit of a discussion on the differences between linear learning and non-linear learning. And I remember that in the workshop you were really pushing like, hey, let's do things that doesn't make sense as kind of a way to as a way to challenge our methodics. And I really remember this one moment that you know, you propose something, or I propose something, and I said like, and then I said like, yeah, but it will really not fit right now. And then you said like, that's why we should do it. And see how it like unfold in the class, and how it will, you know, how it will take us to somewhere that we cannot know. And actually, I don't remember if I told you about it when you were here in Vienna 2 weeks ago, but I had now a really inspiring experience that was really related to this idea of what you're talking about, learning as an experience. When I was teaching when I went with my son to learn how to cycle, how to ride the bicycle. And and if you notice now, I was about to say that I was teaching my son how to ride, and then I rephrased myself. And we went to see how it's going to happen. And that's what actually happened, because again, me with my teacher persona, I came, I took the bicycle, and I started instruct him what to do. And I noticed that he doesn't maintain the tension of constantly paddling. And then, of course, if you don't paddle, you fall. And I was trying to kind of, you know, make him aware of it by by repeating it, saying him, hey, now you need to keep doing it. Oh, did you notice you don't do it? You're falling, like you keep doing it. And then I recognized that, you know, the only thing that is happening is that he's becoming frustrated. And also a little bit me, because of course I didn't manage to filter all the expectations I have from him yet.
From him learning the bicycle quickly.
Yeah, you know me, my son should ride the bike very quick.
The trap of all fathers whatsoever.
Yes.
I remember you bring the horror of my father wanting me to get a bicycle, and I'm like, I don't, not yet, give me some more time.
But what was fundamentally, like, you know, interesting, like I had a certain, I don't know why, but I had a certain intuition to change what I'm doing, and I just started to just compliment him for who he, like, just for being. I was like, great, very nice that you're trying, yeah, very good, like, keep trying. And then I just started to hold a bit more loosely his chair, and, you know, just to play a little bit with the amount of muscle tension I'm having with the foot and kind of with the fingers, and slowly I've just recognized it, like, you know, like I can just let go, and he does it without me saying anything. And to a certain moment, like he recognized that I'm standing by his side and I'm not holding him, and he was so excited, and he was like, "Hey, Papa, I'm doing it! Look, I'm doing it!" Like, he was so excited.
Mhm.
And there was a certain fundamental learning for me there about, like, what does it mean to just create a space for learning, and what does it mean to, show the person the path that they should walk. And I think that, like, as you've mentioned, when it comes to really concrete knowledge, and for me, a good example would be like an armbar, like you don't cultivate an learning experience that people will understand how to generate leverage, but you show them like what are the proper point of contact between the hip and the elbow, and then they know how to make an armbar. But we do have this capacity to learn by ourselves. And like, how do you address it when you teach? Like, how do you combine the two?
Totally.
It's like, you don't want to exclude them, because we do have all this knowledge that we have behind us, and we are standing on, shoulders of giants with the amount of information in the world. But yeah, like, how do you bring the other quality that is a little less popular, I would say?
Yeah, I mean, look, just the standing on the shoulder of giants. What I noticed, like, for example, a lot of people that don't give credit to their sources, they like to quote "standing on the shoulders of giants." It's like the credit needs to be given when it's given. Okay, so this, I think, taking out for a moment this thing is important, because the ability, what you said exactly, people have the capacity to learn by themselves. First of all, what sometimes is, like, for example, can be a big help is, especially when you bring external ideas, because armbar, I would never think in my life about doing an armbar. And I think that riding a bicycle is also something that, you need to show the bicycle to your son, and you need to kind of address the importance of it, like, to a certain level. And then when you get an external idea, like riding a bicycle or doing an armbar, usually, at least at the beginning stages, you will be so focused on the kind of fundamentals that you will forget about all the other things that support your ability to do it. So the easiest, like, people, when they learn something new that have a lot of mechanical demands, they forget to breathe. Very common. This is like with the armbar, like, you're so much concentrated on angles and positioning that you're like, stiffing everything, contracting, and not breathing, which has nothing to do with the actual, application of the thing. So, for example, redirecting the attention, and we humans, we have limited attention span. So redirecting the attention, okay, everything that you do is good, but what about your breath? What about your muscle tone? What about your emotional content? Because again, the same story with the bicycle and with kids is very obvious. Kids needs to be happy and to enjoy in order to do things good. And sometimes you will need to guide a kid. And again, I remember I didn't work with kids for many years, but I used to work with kids for a few good years. Reminding them, like, the joy is usually forgetting about the fundamental aspects of the technique, so you need to paddle your legs, you need to maintain the balance. How fun it is that we're both traveling here in the street, the weather is so nice. The kid, like, he starts to enjoy something, and then the fundamental that has been taught are coming out naturally. One of another very inspiring reference for this was one of my yoga teachers, Shimon Ben-Avi, that he used to always say, you can show the horse the water, you cannot make them drink. And I think this is a lot of teaching. You bring it, you place it in the space, whatever was asked to be learned, and then you just allow things to move in the right place. Now, of course, it means also you frame it, like, you sometimes, like, that's too far, like, you want to do a handstand on the bicycle, no, this is like, it's dangerous, it's not a good idea at this moment. But in general, once the fundamentals has been addressed, you can forget about them and let them kind of circulate in the learning space.
And I guess, like,
this is
when I hear what you bring out from my question, I think like that one thing that is a big challenge, I guess, also when you find yourself in a position of being a student and also in teaching, is that I mean, the dance world to a certain degree is still free from that, I think. But I see it a lot in, you know, what is called the movement culture, the jiu-jitsu, martial art in general, like this idea that, you know, like that knowledge as a product. And
yes,
and that you know that I can deliver you ABC, you know, like forget about like the I'm not interested in like talking about, you know, capitalism and that, but really just about like what is happening in the moment with the body, and I think that it creates this embodiment, it creates this connection, and when I read something like you know, I don't know, join this workshop and you will get, I don't know, I had some Instagram or Facebook ad with some yoga to unlock hip mobility, you know, like, and then, you know, get it now, you will get and there's this list of what you're gonna get. I think it creates like a complete disembodiment, because it's like, it's already like, you already look at your body as something external that you need to do something with. And yeah, and you know, and it's
totally. And yeah,
that's
no,
a good
just
legacy.
like to say,
That's one of the good legacy of the dance world, that to a certain degree we still operate like in the experience, maybe too much, so that's why there's like a lot of also problem in the dance world, but there is still this, you know, like genuinely appreciating experience. You know, I remember how I studied dance, you know, like spending a lot of hours lying, just feeling my body, you know, like working a lot with also somatic ideas.
Well, you cannot, I don't think you can create any art without appreciating the experience. You know, and this is the dance world is definitely is very much aware of this truth. Art is being created through experience, and I agree with you that, like, I also don't want to get into a conversation about capitalism, but the commodity of the body and knowledge about the body is very, very confusing. You know, unlocking hips, the body as a car, the movement as a system, programming. You know, how much I see programming and discussions about programming. And of course, I believe in structures. You know, I write my structures of practice, you know, and you can call it programs. And I believe in strategies, you know, and you can call these strategies systems. But to think that every physical knowledge can be put in a box and given for the highest bid, this is very it's just a very tricky path. And again, the only thing that I can go back to is the experience. I don't know, also my learning experiences, again, like, you know, and to name, you know, Yoshito Ono, who passed away, which was my Buto teacher, Yuri Ravitz, which was my acrobatic teachers in Israel, Takamasa Watanabe in Jiu-Jitsu in Tokyo. All of these people, what's so strong is the kind of the sensory memory that I have from spending time with them. You know, and of course, they all had amazing content, and it was all, none of them was like, you know, abusing their presence with me to, like, you know, they were all very, very practical people who dealt with dance, with fighting, with acrobatics. But their approach had something that is much more significant than little pieces of knowledge. The little pieces of knowledge that I took from them, I anyways integrated and had to change to my own body, to my own context, to my own circumstances. And I think that all people, they have the ability to integrate with like, you know, with potential and with potential power and grace. But I think that in order to go through this integration and that it really becomes part of you, you cannot just, like, you know, just buy it in a piece. You need to literally experience it. And again, what is experience? We can also get, it can become very philosophical, but there is something about multisensory exposure over focused time that cannot be replaced with with anything when talking about the body.
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, I think there is this scene in the movie Matrix, when Neo is being connected to the head and they download Kung Fu or something like this, and then he knows Kung Fu. And I think that
how I wish you could download Kung Fu.
I will definitely download.
I buy it immediately.
Definitely, I would also
totally.
From all the things I studied Kung Fu, but I think I didn't download it enough. But I think just the sense that we can, this idea is in the space, we can download knowledge, and I think that there is a lot of exploitation of this, knowledge is something that, the moment you're interested about something, knowledge is like a drug. You want to know more, no? And I feel that there is a certain exploitation when it comes to again, how practically you can make people be interested in your work and how you present it, and also what kind of expectation it creates. And I can definitely say about myself that I'm not free of those wishes on the consumer side. I find myself also wanting things to to just be there, okay, I'm gonna subscribe to this service and then I'm gonna get that. And I think that that's something that I find very, very unique, maybe again in the body, that the body teaches us a certain different perception about time and duration. And martial art is always a great example, because there is this cliche of okay, you do the armbar when you're a white belt and you keep doing it, and when you're a black belt it's a different armbar, but it's the same thing at the same time. And that's something that I find it that for me it opens a certain field that is not practical, even if I look at things that are extremely practical. Even if I look at a study of let's say again jiu-jitsu, the mechanics of controlling another body, which has a very particular application, just by dedicating so much amount of time for it, it opens up a certain connection to something that is way bigger than actually knowing how to control somebody, which is about being, being with people, being with people in the same space, experiencing yourself over and over in the same situation, and then this level of, as you say, the learning as experience is inevitably present. And I don't know, I find inside of me there's a certain tension as a teacher, wanting to deliver good results to people, and making my practice also attractive for others who wants to consume it. And on the other hand, I have a complete total wish to push it away from anything that relates to me. And how do you, as somebody, and how do you confront it, especially as someone who also to a certain degree is known for a lot of skills? You've built a huge body of work and a lot of skills, and how do you approach it? How do you negotiate it?
I think that being multidisciplinary in that sense is not you have a lot of perspectives, and the perspectives it's very fine to find absolute coherence. I think that in that sense, for example, what you say, you're related to jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu will teach you to fight in a certain way and under certain circumstances, and probably by being in a space with people, interacting, going again and again, changing, you learn a lot of things except for fighting. But there's only so much mathematics or painting that you can learn from jiu-jitsu. And then the ability to come again and again to mathematics, or to come again and again to painting, actually has a very, very different set of priorities than coming again and again to jiu-jitsu. And probably they're different. And being different, it might mean that there is tension between them. The strategy that I use to come back to my canvas is not the same strategy that I use to come back to my jiu-jitsu, or they come back to, I mean, I don't have such a mathematics practice, but that I speculate that if I did have one. So I think the different perspectives create tension. And I think this is, at the end of the day, it's not the tension. I'm not afraid from tension. And maybe this is like going back to the beginning of conversation. Maybe because being an Israeli, I grew up in constant tension around me. Maybe also the traveling, again, gave me tools of adapting. Then, of course, that in tension, there is a certain, what tension creates is that you need to discriminate. You cannot always adapt, and, you cannot always, I want things to coexist. That's my goal as a multidisciplinary person. I don't want that my acrobatics will be a paradox to my dance. I want them to have a flow that they can combine. I don't want that my fighting would have a paradox with my meditation. I want them to have a flow and that they combine. But I also know it's not sometimes possible, and then I need to choose. And when I choose, sometimes the choice supports my whole being more and supports it less. There was a recent story that I thought about. It can seem like a deviation, but I think it has an interesting. So Yuval Noah Harari, the famous author, which the Homo sapiens, I used to go to his course in University of Tel Aviv. I wasn't the university student, and I used to listen to this course before it became a book. And it was a wonderful course, and I really appreciate the way he thinks. And I think also he's a multidisciplinary historian, and this is what made his all alternative history texts accessible to people all over the world, and being something that is not an easy read, but is super popular. And recently I learned that one of the things that he did in order that the book would, one of his books, I don't remember which one of it, I don't think it's the first one, I think it's the second or the third, will be published in Russia, will be to take out the chapter that talks about Putin. Now, this seems like a very big paradox. Like, okay, he's clever enough to understand that accessibility means you need to give people content that they can relate to. On the other hand, the book talks about alternative histories. So taking out something for accessibility seems like a little bit of a problem in the coherence. Okay. Now, this example is very far from my paradox and my lacks of coherence. But I felt that, even though the first thing that I thought about was to criticize him, the second thing that I felt was to resonate with him. Because I feel that this possessing multiple perspectives will create this type of choices, and better to have, better that these perspectives will prevail into something that is less paradoxical. But sometimes these paradoxes will happen if I choose to open myself to different trajectories of development and knowledge. So I think it kind of answers.
It's an interesting example. I guess it's more controversial because of history and and like if you decide to, let's say, erase part of history to accommodate people's feeling, it's more problematic. But I can resonate with it when you like trying to filter it into what we are doing. And there is one last chapter I want to open with you before we finish, because we already are talking for quite some time, and which is about our shared common ground as artists active in the field of contemporary dance. And I know that you emphasize, like, you have a lot of importance, you put a lot of importance on the notion of creativity. And I remember that when you were here at my place, and we had this conversation about what is creativity, and I was trying to argue, I had a certain argument kind of to prove why I'm not a creative person, and you were saying, no, that's actually proof that you are a creative person. And we had this little funny discussion, and to shortly outline, like the main point was like how creativity is present in the moment, like in the moment of choice making, and not in the necessarily in the actualization of something. So you can make a sculpture and not be creative, or you can make a sculpture and be very creative. And and what I wanted to ask you in particular is like, why do you put so much importance, or why is it important for you that creativity will be present in what you're doing when you think about yourself living in a body, aging, being connected to the world? Like how is it something that is not, where is the fascia between creativity and other aspects of being, and not particularly I'm an artist and therefore I create, you know, like where is it going further than that, and why is it important for you to be creative, to engage with creativity?
It's a very I mean, it's a very big question, I think.
Yeah, I know we will not maybe manage to answer everything, but like just to start something.
Yes, totally. Well, I think the biggest split, I would say, is the split between why creativity is a professional and why creativity is a human. Then I think that first of all, like, you know, there is a wonderful work that is called The Creative Quest by Questlove, which is it's a hip hop artist from the Roots, and he did a lot of projects and researches about creativity, and he has this like, you know, the end of one of his books, he said, I fail to define creativity, so let's all relate to creativity as is a person who consciously create, you know. So I think this is already kind of an interesting take, to consciously try to create things. I think that as a professional in the art world, you know, whatever that means, this game of reinventing the tools and reinventing the objectives and reinventing the possibilities is something that I can more relate to than varying existing, making variations on existing forms. No, I'm not so good at making variations on existing forms. I think I'm not disciplined enough, and I think also I'm not. Yeah, you know, it's just that there is something about this question as a professional. Like, I'm taking all of my pre-existing knowledge, and then I'm not asking what is there. I'm asking, what can it become? You know, what can become out of everything that I learned, everything that is being asked, everything that is there? What can, and this question by itself, I think it inspires because it makes you notice possibilities that didn't exist before. And I think this is one of the roles of art in society, to show other possibilities. And so I think that as a professional, I feel that creativity is something that it gives me a sense that I'm doing something. First of all, I connect to it. I feel like I do it. I feel I do it well. I feel I have a certain, I don't know if it's a talent or I just like it, but also I feel that it has a possible contribution to society. And therefore I pursue it. And I really highlight it as a professional. In contemporary dance, I think, for example, people tend to forget that the whole point of contemporary dance is to reinvent the dance every time. You know, there is no traditional contemporary dance. It's a paradox, you know. So, for example, I even chose to use, and I don't think that I so much, and you already know my work, I don't think it's that connected to contemporary dance in many things. But I think that, for example, my choice to pursue studies on this art form, and it would be any other contemporary art form, is that the body of knowledge does relate with reinventing and not with following and varying. So yeah, so I'd say as a professional, both me being able to connect to it and resonate with it, and also thinking that it has social contribution. So this is part of this choice. And then as a person, I think it's a very fulfilling thing, you know, to start something and then it comes out as something that you never imagined before. It's almost like it can almost give you like kind of a life purpose, like, you know, because it's like this realization when you know, after moving in a way you never moved before, writing something that you never even imagined, painting something you never even imagined, making something with a material that, like, you know, this feeling of something that you couldn't imagine is very fulfilling. It kind of gives you hope that life will be interesting, and it makes me happy, you know, like I'm very happy to keep these realizations. And I know that these realizations, if I take them for granted, they will not happen by themselves. So I think that if as a professional is what I said before, as a person is simply because it really makes me happy, and it really gives momentarily life meaning every time that I create something. So there would be kind of the idea around creativity, like the reasons for me about creativity.
And is it something that you find important also to cultivate, let's say, when you're educating people, like, or is it something that are there tools that you can say, like, I think those are good tools to help oneself to be creative?
Yes, totally. I mean, I think that first of all, taking out, and you know, and if we go taking out the necessity is something that I think is very important when working with people and cultivating creativity, because there is something about creativity that is not, at the moment of creation, is not so much it. Even though nowadays what I'm saying can be very arguable, and I think that most of the world is moving, a lot of creativity is going more towards the direction of design rather than creation, and it's a very big discussion. But I think that if creativity is always based on utility, and this is something we also spoke about in your house, it's hard to experience, like, you know, the real potential of it, the real personal potential of it. There is something about creativity, is like, I don't need to do anything. I have a space, and then from this space, something that hasn't been premeditated before entering this space has been created. So when I'm trying to cultivate creativity within my collaborators, within my students, within the dancers that work with me, and it's very similar to what we did in the workshop. It's like, okay, let's forget for a moment about our syllabus and our trajectory, which is important, and it's there for a reason. This is what gives credibility. Let's forget, and let's try to open up a bit more of a creative space. Let's see what can become out of this trajectory, and let's not just continue building it step by step. So taking out the utility, taking out the necessity, I think is a very good strategy to cultivate it.
That's a very interesting notion, and I can really pull it into my own universe now because of this wish to open this space, this podcast, and to share time with people I find interesting, and of course, you know, like, I can find a lot of reasons why I should do it, but yeah, I think this conversation for me is already a good representation of the quality that I'm interested in, that yeah, to dive into a certain unknown space that contains tension, and this tension is like a wave. You can drown under it, but it can also lift you up. And if you if you let go to a certain degree from the expectation, then you can find yourself floating. And if you struggle, then of course, like, you go underneath. And I really want to say thank you for coming and, like, helping me to initiate with this beginning. I felt very comfortable to invite you as a first guest, first because of our friendship, and second because of who you are and what you can contribute to this space. And yeah, before we finish, I just wanted to offer you also a space to share a little bit what is next. What are your plans? Where people can connect to you if they're interested in keep hearing ideas from you, or study with you, or watch some stuff that you're doing. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, you know, like, future for people who are listening and might be interested in keeping in touch with you.
Totally. First, thanks for having me. And I must say, it was very easy. Always a pleasure to talk to you. As I told you in your house 2 weeks ago, I think you're a very creative person, and I always learn from our exchanges. So really big pleasure. So as you mentioned, I work very closely with my partner, Rosetu Tuzaus. We have two bodies of work. One is movement archery, and one is Wonderground, our performance arts company. So for movement archery, of course, everybody that listened to this and are not familiar, they can check out movementarchery.com to sign up for a newsletter. We have about something between 8 to 10 workshops planned for the spring of 2021, if the regulations will allow it, which I hope they will. Mostly around Europe, United States, probably after the summer. We're also working now on a new series of, it's a combination of kind of, as people who have listened until here, it's kind of this whole non-linear learning essay products, basically. Funny, but it will be a series of videos that are called essays on freedom in movement, that they will cover certain combination of technical idea with propositions, how to integrate them creatively, and how to turn them into kind of a personal artistic practice. So all of this information will be published very soon. We're working on it very diligently recently. Yeah, so both workshops and the essays all through our website. And then in Wonderground Company, we just finished to create a piece for the 4th year students of the Salzburg Experimental Academy of Dance. We are now getting back to a duo that was supposed to premiere in the spring, but probably because of COVID, it will be delayed, that is called After the Rain. Then we are interested also in, we have a few more projects coming up. Everything can be found on wondergroundcompany.com. That anybody that wants to see, we'll have a schedule of performances soon. We're also taking opportunities to work as freelance choreographers in a lot of different setups. So yeah, so I guess all information can be found there. And I think this is it.
Pleasure, brother. Thank you very much. And I will definitely invite you again to be a guest here.
Yes. Thank you, Matan.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.